Hi, and welcome. You're listening to the X22 Report. My name is Dave, and this is episode 1546B, and today's date is April 16th, 2018, and the title of the episode is The Picture is Becoming Clearer, Moves and Countermoves. Let's get into the economic collapse, political and geopolitical news. Now, it looks like Michael Horowitz came out with a report, and he's saying that the entire report is going to be coming out in May. But what we're getting out of this right now is that McCabe lied. The Justice Department Office of Inspector General delivered this report to Congress on Friday, accusing former FBI Director Andrew McCabe of repeatedly misleading investigators. McCabe was fired on March 16th after the OIG found that he made an unauthorized disclosure to the news media and lacked candor, including under oath on multiple occasions. Now, Trump was out there and he went haywire over this. He said he lied. McCabe was totally controlled by Comey. McCabe is Comey. No collusion, all made up by this den of thieves and lowlives. And McCabe and others in the deep state, the FBI, they all knew that this was coming. This is why they started the GoFundMe account for McCabe's legal defense, because if he was completely innocent and there was no problems and there was nothing really there, they wouldn't have started this. This wasn't to say, they didn't start a fund to say, oh, help McCabe out because he lost his job so he can have some income. This was specifically set up for his legal defense. And they raised about $568,000. They knew that this was coming. Now, it looks like the UK, they are pushing their crazy narrative that Russia poisoned the Skripals, Yulia and Sergei. Guess what they created? A dossier. Here we go once again. They created this dossier saying that, yes, Russia was behind this. There was a letter that also claims that during the 2000s, a special Russian unit began to develop chemical weapons specifically for state-sponsored attacks and to train personnel from special units in the use of these weapons. This program subsequently included investigations of ways of delivering nerve agents, including by application to door handles. This is what the letter says. Now, once again, we need to think about all of this. Why would they wait for Yulia to leave the country, then poison Sergei and Yulia together, put the poison on the door handles, and if it truly was novichok, they'd be dead by now. And if the UK has nothing to hide, they would allow Yulia, because she is a Russian citizen, to speak to the Russian authorities under the treaty that Russia and the UK have. But of course, there's a cover-up. They don't want them speaking to anybody. Now, Lavrov came out, and he came out with information that it was not novichok that was used to poison the Skripals. He came out and said that the Swiss lab has confirmed that BZ toxin was used instead. This is produced in the US or UK. And he's saying that this was used in the poisoning. Now, the Swiss center sent the results to the OPCW. However, the UN chemical watchdog limited itself only to confirming the formula of the substance used to poison the Skripals in its final report without mentioning anything about the other facts presented in the Swiss document. Now, the Swiss center, what they did was they sent the results to the OPCW. However, the UN chemical watchdog limited itself only to confirming the formula of the substance used to poison the Skripals in its final report without mentioning anything about the other facts presented in the Swiss document. Now, Lavrov is asking why. Why did the OPCW decide to do this? Now, the lab that Lavrov is talking about, this is the Spies laboratory, controlled by the Swiss Federal Office for Civil Protection and ultimately by the country's defense minister. The lab is also an internationally recognized center of excellence in the field of the nuclear, biological, and chemical protection, and is one of the 5 centers permanently authorized by the OPCW. So, right now, there's a question of what actually happened here. And there's information coming out where the lab is saying that they can neither, confirm or deny what Lavrov is saying. So right now, they're stepping back. Lavrov says he has the proof. He has the documentation, and it was not Novichok. So once again, we can see that the UK threw out this dossier to try to prove what has been happening there. Russia has been gathering evidence to show that the UK is lying. And from all accounts, from everything that we've been seeing, we know that this was a false flag. In the UK right now, they're trying to scramble to try to figure out how they can get out of this and to prove that, yes, that Russia did this. And it's really falling apart right now. And again, just like the dossier against Trump, they have a dossier against Russia. And we can see right now that this is not going to work because that thing is going to be torn apart like there's no tomorrow. Wikileaks, they have revealed that the Saudis, they wanted regime change in Syria. Even if they had to play nice with Russia, their goal, their main goal, was always to remove Assad and take control of Syria. And WikiLeaks dumped this out there, and they wanted to have regime change by any means available. Didn't matter. They'll false flag chemical attacks. They'll do whatever they have to do, play nice with Russia, and that report was dumped. Now, let's take a look at what happened once again in Syria. I did a special report on Saturday. I want to continue with this. And a lot of people are writing in saying, well, Trump is now controlled by the deep state. This was an attack that was pushed by the deep state. He's turned, and we're heading towards World War III. So if the deep state has control over Trump, they would want certain outcomes, benefits to this missile attack. And we need to go through each one of them. Now, remember, they would need Trump to fund the moderate rebels, which he discontinued. They would need him to fund the Kurds once again, which he discontinued. He disbanded the training programs for them. That would be something that they would probably want back. They needed to hit Russia, its bases or troops. The strikes needed to hit Syria bases, troops or assets to start the war. Trump waited days before launching missiles, allowing the Russian to prepare the S-400 missile system, move ships, move military assets, harden the defense zones. Same goes with Syria. If he's with the deep state, they would have attacked right off the bat. Why give them this period of time? With the missile attack, the deep state would want the moderate rebels, the Islamic State, Al-Qaeda, and the rest of the terrorist factions to gain more ground like we saw with Obama. Remember, going back to Obama's term, when they were bombing inside of Syria, and you have to remember, the targets that were chosen back then were not chosen by the Pentagon or the military or CENTCOM. It was chosen by Obama. The reason for this was to allow the Islamic State to gain ground. And if you notice, during his term, the Islamic State grew because they had the oil convoys, they were bombing certain infrastructure, allowing the Islamic State to make huge gains, because really, the U.S. Air Force at that time was the Islamic State Air Force. And of course, the moderate rebels, Al-Qaeda, they all followed along with this. The deep state, if he's part of the deep state, they would want the EU to be unified, the coalition forces, all together. All for one, one for all. But, that's what they would want, just like they had in the past. Everyone was together. Yes, Assad did this. We all need to go in there. And this, again, the benefit would be allow the deep state to gain the upper hand. Now, let's go through what's actually happening here. And let's see if any of these things are benefiting the deep state. Because since they're controlling Trump, this is the outcome they would want. And I guess this would be the outcome that Trump would want if he's part of the deep state now. So right now, China is out there, and they're blasting the American arrogance, saying that this is ridiculous, there's no proof, this was a false flag. They launched missile attacks on deceptive information. And this is very interesting because China is out there, and usually they stay very, very silent. And they're out there saying that, yeah, this is a false flag. The information coming in is completely fake, phony, and false. Russia is saying the same thing too. Now, the reports that were coming in is that the US, UK, France, missiles went in and all of them hit the targets. It was fantastic. And none of the missiles that were launched by the U.S. and its allies entered Russian air defense zones that protect facilities in Tartus and the air bases. The Syrian air base and their military assets were secure. And what's very interesting about all this is that Russia did launch S-400, the Pantsir missile systems, and they intercepted the Tomahawk missile systems, the Storm Shadow missile systems, and the Pentagon right now, they said there was about 105 cruise missiles that were launched, and they're saying that all of them hit their targets, which is kind of unbelievable. But now the Pentagon is a little concerned about the results of the Syrian airstrikes, and they're looking into that, and they're starting to realize that, their missile systems really didn't hit targets like they're saying that they did. Now, according to the Pentagon's official story, the US, France, and the UK launched these missiles, and they all hit, and they're saying like 70-something missiles hit the chemical factory, the Barzeh Research and Development Center, but the damage there is so minor. Now, this is the missiles that were launched. The USS Monterey fired 30 Tomahawk cruise missiles. The USS Laboon fired 7. The USS Higgins fired 23. The USS John Warner fired 6. The French frigate fired 3 Storm Shadows. The B-1B strategic bombers fired 19. And Q said, if you remember his post, that a B-1 bomber was going to fire 19 of these. 19 AGM-158 air-launched cruise missiles. The British Typhoon and Tornado fighters fired about 8 Storm Shadows, and the French Rafale and Mirage fired about 9 Storm Shadows. So these are all the missiles that were fired, but a lot of them were intercepted, and there's actually video of these missiles being taken down by the S-400. And you can see the missiles, the S-400, the Pantsirs being launched from the ground, shooting up and actually hitting their target. Now, the Syrian army is declaring victory over the rebels in eastern Ghouta, just hours after the airstrikes. So the airstrikes hit, and it allowed the Syrian army to basically mount a major offensive against the terrorist groups. Now that's kind of strange, because you think it would be the opposite, where the terrorist groups, they mounted a major offensive and they were able to get the jump on the Syrian forces. But it was actually the other way around, and now eastern Ghouta is now free of the terrorist groups. Now out in Douma, the Syrians that were jailed there, they're telling their stories about how they were tortured by the militants, by the terrorists. It was inhumane conditions in the jails, and we can see right now they were put to work. And what were they doing? They were digging trenches and tunnels to interconnect Douma with the rest of the towns and cities, because remember, the terrorists used this tunnel network under Syria to get around, to move weapons cache, to move their chemical weapons around Syria. Now, Douma right now has been freed of the terrorists, and the Syrian army has uncovered the biggest tunnel used by the rebel groups, by the terrorist groups. And the tunnel was located under the National Hospital with several branches, and it went off to many different areas. They had electricity rooms, they had parking lots, they had many different things underneath, weapons, underground artillery, they had everything stored underground. So just remember this, because as we move forward, you're going to see how this all plays into everything. There's a tunnel network. There's a lot of tunnels. They move weapons back and forth. They move their personnel back and forth. And we can see right now, this is how they got everything, moved around and got everything to where it needed to be. Now, Assad was out of the country while this was happening. He's come back to the country. He's working now. And basically, he's saying that he's not afraid of the U.S., NATO missile systems anymore. He's saying that the air defense that Russia put into place was able to stop almost all the missiles, and he's not nervous about this. He's not nervous about a missile attack or anything like this anymore because he sees how well the Russian air defense systems have worked. Now, the people in Damascus, they are rallying support for Assad, for the Syrian armed forces, and they're cheering Assad on. Actually, you really would want the opposite to happen, because this is what the deep state has been telling us all along, that the people hate Assad. They want him out. But we could see people dancing in the street. We see people coming back, all the refugees, millions of people coming back into the country, when they told us that Assad is a dictator. He's, poisoning his own people, torturing his own people. Why would people voluntarily come back to the country then? That doesn't make sense. Now, Russia has responded to the U.S. airstrikes. They're sending Syria more military weapons. They're bringing in more weapons through the Bosphorus Strait. They're going to be bringing into their en route to the port of Tartus. This includes a Ural 4320 tanker, BTR-80 armed personnel carriers, and other weapons and things like that. So, again, by having this strike, you wouldn't want Russia bringing in more weapons. That doesn't make any sense. So let's recap all those questions that we asked in the beginning. Let's ask them again. Now, is Trump going to fund the moderate rebels? No, Trump is not going to fund the Kurds, the terrorists, the deep state. They're not getting any more money. They're not getting the weapon delivery. They're not getting any of this. The strikes didn't hit Russia, didn't hit their bases, their troops, didn't hit Syria, didn't hit their assets. They had ample time to prepare. The missiles intercepted the Tomahawks, the Storm Shadows, and everything like that. Trump again waited days, allowed Assad and Putin to beef up their air defense, move their military assets. So that doesn't make sense whatsoever. It allowed the Pentagon, the White House, to observe the Russian defense missile system in action. Because they fired their missiles, now they see that Russia has the ability to pretty much stop almost all the missiles. Now, you would think that the terrorist rebels would gain territory, momentum. But actually, the opposite happened. Syria gained the momentum, gained territory after the strike. It wasn't the terrorist groups. So, what was gained for the deep state? Not much. Russia's bringing in more military assets. The people are rallying around Assad. They discovered their tunnel networks. The false flag ground zero area is still intact. The OPCW is on their way to investigate. So right now, we are not seeing the benefits to the deep state. And if Trump was controlled by the deep state doing their bidding, you would see this. Now let's take the other side to this. And when I say Trump, I'm talking about the Patriots. I'm not talking about Trump alone. I'm just saying Trump because it's a lot easier to say Trump, the Patriots, and everyone else working with him. So Trump right now, he came out and said he never agreed with the war in Syria and Iraq. He wanted the troops out of there. We spend trillions of dollars in these countries, and he made the announcement that we're going to be bringing the troops out. And this is what they wanted to do. He made the announcement, and all of a sudden we had this false flag saying there was a gas attack in Duma, which so far there's no evidence. Russia went in there. They looked around and they spoke to doctors. They looked for patients. They looked for bodies. Couldn't find any. They sealed off the whole area, waiting for the OPCW to come in. Remember, Syria, Russia, they invited the OPCW in to investigate. Now, Macron is sending a message. The deep state is actually sending a message to Trump right now because Trump sent a message to the deep state. He said, we want the troops out of there. Macron is out there saying that he convinced Trump to keep the troops inside of Syria. And Macron is patting himself on the back, saying, yes, I was responsible for that. Now, the White House came out and they said, no, we deny any of that. They came out and they said the U.S. mission has not changed. The president has been clear that he wants U.S. forces to come out as quickly as possible. So again, the deep state is pushing propaganda Trump right now is denying it, saying no, he repeated his message, troops are coming home. Nikki Haley, who is part of the deep state, sent a message to Trump and the Patriots saying, listen, U.S. will not withdraw troops from Syria until the goals are accomplished. Now, of course, they made up some goals. The Islamic State has to be completely destroyed. Syria must declare all their chemical weapons stockpile. And the problem with that statement is, if you don't have chemical weapons, because the OPCW, Russia, the United States all signed off on this, if you don't have them, how do you declare them? It's impossible. This is what the deep state does. They make these impossible goals that the countries can never abide by. It can't work, because it's like asking someone, hand over your weapon. If you don't have a weapon, how do you comply? You can't. It's impossible. And they know this. This is why they do this. It's done on purpose. Now, what's very interesting about the Barzeh facility is that the Organization for the Prohibition of Chemical Weapons conducted a round of inspections and found no chemical weapons on November 22nd, November 2017. They're saying there's no sign of anything going on there whatsoever. And this clearly explains why there was no chemical agent cloud that dispersed following the strike on this area. Because if they have vats of chemical weapons, chlorine and things like that, this would have gone into the air and hurt a lot of people. If it was sarin, it was chlorine, it would have hurt a lot of people around the area. But again, there was nothing. There was no chemical agents. There was nothing there whatsoever. So this was not a chemical lab. So this is kind of odd that they're saying that they destroyed a chemical lab. Now remember, there's a battle going on between the Trump and the Patriots and the deep state. We're really fighting each other. Can you imagine if we came out to the American people and said, this is infighting. This has nothing to do with Syria. The country would completely lose it and say, what do you mean? We're bombing each other? This faction over here is bombing this faction over here? And again, it's when people learn the truth. This type of truth, I don't think a lot of people will be able to handle. I know a lot of people say, let it just all come out. Let the pieces fall where they may and let everyone deal with it. Maybe that would be good. We don't know. But right now, these things are happening behind the scenes. Now, there's reports out there, and we know that Syria and Russia invited the OPCW in there. They wanted the entire area inspected. It's being protected. It's secure. And right now, the news is out there saying that the OPCW is being kept from inspecting the area. Now, Russia is saying that, listen, we invited them in, and they're saying that they need the appropriate UN permit to get in there. And the UN is saying, oh no, they can just go in there. So someone is definitely blocking them from going in there. Now, why would you invite someone in if you're just going to block them? It makes no sense. It looks like a certain faction, the deep state, is trying to block the inspectors from going in there and doing their work because they know that this whole thing is staged. So the question becomes, what happened in Syria? What was hit? Why were all the missiles blown out of the sky except for certain ones? Why did those pass through? Now, you know that Russia had the ability to shoot those other missiles down. Why did they let those missiles hit certain targets? Now, remember the tunnels underneath of Syria. The tunnels that run throughout Damascus, Douma, Ghouta, all these different areas to bring weapons and chemicals back and forth. Well, it looks like that this site that they bombed was going to be used by the terrorist groups. And this was being set up by the CIA, MI5, the dark forces, and it wasn't going to be used by the Syrians. They've taken it over. and they were setting it up maybe to be used as a chemical plant or things like that. But they didn't get all their, stash in this area. Now, I want to go back before the attack just for one sec, where remember when Trump made this announcement to Putin that we have new smart missiles headed your way? We have new ones developed, and they're smart, and they're going to be hitting you. Well, first of all, where were the purchases of these new missiles? Were they retrofitted onto all these ships? When were the deliveries made? Were they put onto the bombers? When were they developed? So really, were there new missiles? No, not really. I mean, the Storm Shadow missiles, they were different. I don't know if Russia experienced these before. These are long-range air-launched cruise weapons that weigh around 900 pounds. They can travel as far as 180 miles when launched. These missiles are some of the most sophisticated air-launched weapons in the world. They're designed to hit well-defended static targets like facilities, bunkers, and bridges. And how does it work? Well, the missile detaches from the bomber, its wings fold out, and it enters a pre-programmed low and fast terrain hugging attack altitude, allowing it to cut under radar and air defenses. As it enters its final approach, Storm Shadow jettisons its nose cone to reveal a high-resolution infrared camera. The target recognition hardware then compares what is coming up on the ground with the stored image on the target. Now, is this the new smart missile that Trump was talking about? Maybe, maybe not. But again, Russia had no problem destroying these. So, here we are. Missiles were destroyed, but only a few got in. So, were they in coordination? Did they allow these missiles because they knew what these targets were, and they allowed the U.S. to destroy the deep state targets? Well, it kind of looks that way. We also have to remember that the terrorists were told when the bombing begins, this is when you're going to make your move. So the strategy was bombs away, April showers, as Q would say. What did the rebels do? What did the terrorists do? They revealed their positions. Once their positions were revealed, Assad's forces eliminated them, took control of many, many areas. So, when we look at this, we can see that the strategy here was to hit a deep state target, which was no longer being used by Syria. Maybe there were tunnels underneath this building, because we could see there were tunnels under hospitals and other areas. In the Q posts, we know that they knew the exact locations of No Name's ISIS terrorist forces. That's John McCain. They knew the exact locations. Remember, Q back in post 948, back in March 15th, said the deep state is going to have a dead cat bounce. Maybe this is the dead cat bounce, where they believe they have the upper hand right now. And we see right now that if this was a deep state operation and they forced Trump to do this, everything went wrong. I mean, think about it. Run down the list. The EU is not together on this issue. The ground zero where the chemical attack took place, the false flag, is secure. The rebels, the terrorists, revealed their locations. Assad forces jumped in and eliminated them. They took over Ghouta, Douma, and many other areas. The deep state facilities that we're planning to use was destroyed. Tunnels were found that were I think it was like 116 tunnels were found where they interconnected everywhere. They found huge amount of weapons. I mean, think about what has happened here. And the deep state thinks they have the upper hand. I think it's actually the opposite. I think this strategy was to basically beat down the deep state. Yes, the deep state's going to fight back, but the ultimate goal is to bring the troops out of Syria. And how do you do that? Well, you got to get rid of the deep state in Syria. And I think this was part of the mission. This was part of the bigger picture. And it allowed certain things to happen to allow the Syrian forces, the Russian forces, to gain ground and have the rebels, the Islamic State, the other terrorist groups, to lose their territory. So when you look at this, to me, it looks like the deep state kind of lost out on this. And the deep state right now is sending Trump messages saying, listen, the troops aren't leaving. I mean, think about what Nikki Haley's doing right now. She's blatantly telling Trump, listen, the troops aren't leaving. Trump is saying the troops are leaving. And there's messages going back and forth between the deep state and the patriots. And I believe the deep state at this point was set up, even though they think that, oh, we got Trump to fire missiles. I think he played them, not him personally, but patriots and others who are planning this. They played the deep state. This is why you didn't see chemical weapons come out after the explosion. There was no gas coming out. There was nothing there, because this was a deep state facility that might have been used or being prepared to be used as a chemical weapons plant, or maybe as a jump point for another offensive to connect to other tunnels. So we see right now that I don't believe that the deep state has the upper hand at this point. I think the strategy worked in reverse, and the deep state got hammered on this, and Syria and Russia basically made out on this whole entire attack. Listen, everyone, thanks a lot for listening. Be well, be safe, and especially be prepared. Thanks a lot.